Hello and welcome to Sprott Radio. I'm your host, Ed Coyne, Senior Managing Partner at Sprott Asset Management. I'm pleased today to welcome a new and very special guest to our podcast, Heather Hoff, co-founder of Mothers for Nuclear and Operations Procedure Writer for Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant based in California. Heather, thank you for joining Sprott Radio today.
Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about nuclear, and I'm excited you want to talk about it too.
Of course. Well, I'll tell you, I did some research on both you, of course, and your organization, and reading about your background, I have to say it is absolutely fascinating. You know, for our listeners who don't know you, don't know Mothers for Nuclear, can you give us a little bit of insight into your background and how you found your way to nuclear?
Yeah, well, I grew up in rural Arizona and would call myself an environmentalist, a nature lover, and wanted to save the planet. And I thought the way I was going to do that was by, living off the land and conserving resources, using as little as possible. I'm very obsessed with picking up trash, even to this day, composting, all those things. So it's kind of a long journey to nuclear power because that's, kind of the opposite of some of those things, seemingly. But as I grew up and as I got kind of frustrated with other people who did not want to be like me, did not want to conserve electricity, use less water, I got pretty frustrated and realized that people don't really want to go backwards in terms of their energy use or their resource use. We want a higher quality of life for people. And the life that I grew up in was kind of hard, out in the boonies. And we had a composting toilet, which was hugely embarrassing to me, when I had friends over, and it's not necessarily ideal. So I kind of, shifted away from my environmental save the earth roots for a while and went to college, got a degree in engineering. And after I graduated, I couldn't find a job in engineering and kind of reluctantly ended up with a job at my local nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon. And, even after that, it was not like I was, raring to go on nuclear. It took me about 6 years of asking a lot of questions. And I was in operations, which was great. I got to learn all about the different systems in the plant, and I had access to a lot of people who knew a lot, so I could really, dig in on all of my questions and all of my fears and get some good answers. And after about 6 years, I was like, wow, nuclear is kind of amazing. And that's not what I thought before. It had sounded pretty scary to me. I had a lot of my family members who made me nervous about working at the plant, because of the radiation. Yeah, so I was kind of surprised to have this realization. And as I worked there as a reactor operator, I became more and more proud of generating 10% of California's electricity, on this tiny little footprint of land in harmony with nature. And just, realized more and more how special that was and how it did agree with my, save the earth kind of upbringing. This is the best thing I could do is, operate a nuclear power plant.
Well, I can't even imagine the pushback you might have got originally when you said, hey, I got a job going to the nuclear power plant. What did your friends and family say to that? Knowing, you being the environmentalist and having a background in engineering, I guess that probably helped you. But what kind of pushback did you get when that first all went down?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely a very curious person, and I love big equipment. And my dad always wanted to hear about our main generator and how that worked. And so, yeah, that was the easy part of it, is just kind of being curious. But the hard part was definitely the comments about scary things about nuclear. My uncle told me that, a lot of people had died from inhaling hot particles, and I didn't know what that was. And my mom asked me, she's like, well, do you think you should really be working there in your reproductive years? And I just said, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what the risks are. And I'll just go and ask a lot of questions and, hopefully be okay at the end of this journey. And little did I know that I would end up starting a nonprofit specifically to advocate for continued operation of Diablo Canyon and for protection and expansion of nuclear around the world.
Talk about that. Well, first of all, what a great name, Mothers for Nuclear. I mean, that just makes it feel nice and calm and, warm. And we're going to be safe. We're going to be safe. We got Mothers for Nuclear on this. Talk about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you have that idea. For us, it took us a long time to go out on that limb, which it kind of is. And it's a good thing because some people hear that and they're just like kind of jolted, like, what? You're for nuclear? A mother can be for nuclear? And it's just kind of a surprising thing. And I still remember one of the very first interviews we ever did where, the reporter asked us, so you started Mothers for Nuclear, and we started to answer, and he's like, wait, hold on. Everyone in my office is laughing right now. And they didn't believe that there could be such a thing. So, part of it is the shock factor. And part of it is that we believe that mothers have a special, investment in the future and future generations. And we do want to have a good planet to leave for our children and our children's children. And that, being a mother for nuclear is very powerful. Being for something is powerful rather than, protesting something. It's really easy to tear ideas down, but it's really hard to build support. And so when Krista and I started Mothers for Nuclear, we're like, yeah, we're strong. We can do this. We're going to be for this really unpopular thing that's going to make us lose friends. And we're just going to do it because we were so convinced, that the story of kind of how we changed our minds and how we reevaluated the importance of nuclear and started talking about it differently, and how we had to share that with other people, hopefully people like us that were also skeptical.
And so when you start that, is that before or after Diablo Canyon was, I guess, running the risk of being shuttered? Talk about that a little bit, because I think, in the state of California, I can't even imagine dealing with it at the state level, but also the federal level. So walk us through that process and when this all kind of started. What was the chicken or the egg? What made you start Mothers for Nuclear?
Like I said, I took a long time to come around about nuclear. And also, after I kind of started realizing that nuclear was pretty amazing, I had several setbacks in my career where I was pretty scared again. When Fukushima happened, I was terrified and I almost quit my job. And, had to go through a whole nother cycle of questioning, like what really happened? What really are the impacts? And after realizing that a lot of it was because of the rushed and panicked evacuation and that no one was hurt by the events at the plant, I started feeling a lot better. And that event specifically was kind of a case for why we should do nuclear. And also a case for communicating about how we avoid that in the future in terms of our overreaction to fears. So I went through a couple of those cycles, and then, I was pretty fully on board with nuclear is the right thing to save our planet. And then we started hearing rumors that our company wasn't going to relicense the plant. And that's when we started, really getting concerned. Kristen and I went to, some gatherings with other employees, and we were always the last two in the room. Like, what are we going to do about this? Someone's got to do something. Like, we just learned this pretty distressing information. And
what year was that?
Late 2015 is when we started hearing rumors and also started noticing a change in the behavior of our plant management. The tone just shifted, and we could tell that something was going on, something was being planned, and we didn't know what it was, but we decided that we had to, ramp up our activities and try and, speak out in a bigger way than, we had always kind of been a part of the Diablo Canyon Women in Nuclear chapter. We'd been going out to schools. We would, hold public info sessions and talk to people in our community. But we're like, well, that's not really working. We need to go bigger. And how do we do that? And how do we have the most impact? And I think it was, around then that we both started realizing how unique we were. We had kind of a different story. There's not a whole lot of women or mothers that work in nuclear. And, especially like liberal leaning, kind of hippie environmentalist nature lovers in a nuclear plant. It was a bit of a weird thing. So we're like, okay, how do we make sense of this? And how do we tell the story in a way that, will resonate with other people like us who, might potentially be driving this shutdown? And then, of course, 2 months later, they announced the joint proposal to shut down Diablo Canyon and, framed it as kind of a groundbreaking thing with partnerships with environmental groups and labor and, very anti-nuclear groups as well, but saying that it was the best thing for California to, plan for the transition gradually of, losing Diablo Canyon and replacing it with other clean energy. And when our company announced this is what we're going to do, a lot of, our other employees and coworkers kind of just said, okay, well, there's nothing we can do now. The decision's made. And a lot of our community members said the decision's made. There's nothing we can do. And Kristen and I decided just to, keep fighting our hearts out because we really felt like that was the wrong decision. And it was pretty obvious to us that the plan wasn't going to work. And so we feel pretty vindicated now. And also, around 2019 is when it became really obvious that California was having a lot of struggles with not just our clean energy, but our electricity generally, and, under threats of blackout. And so we decided to start pushing, pretty hard at that point in California, and teamed up with a lot of other people to, hold a big rally to save clean energy in San Luis Obispo, and, write to Governor Newsom, do letters, do technical studies, scientific studies, help support anyone who cared about this issue to help us, bring light to, like, there is still time to change the outcome, and it's the best thing for not just Californians, but humans and our planet. And so it's been quite a journey.
And I'm assuming it's worked because I went on the website today, and not only are they open for business, but they're open 24/7, which I thought was really cool. When you Google Diablo Canyon, it says hours of operation. It says 24 hours. It doesn't say 7 days a week. You have to click on 24 hours, and then it shows you every day they're open. So it's 24/7. To me, that's the crux of nuclear power, right? It's a 24/7 base load energy source, and it's clean. Talk about that for a minute, because where are we? Is it mission accomplished? Is it still a conversation? What's going on with Diablo Canyon today?
Well, gosh, there's so much work to do still. Our state has kind of agreed to extend operation of Diablo Canyon by 5 more years. So the company kind of did this, knee-jerk reversal. We call it a pivot, to relicense the plant. And that license is granted by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the process for that is a 20-year license extension. That's just what they're set up to do. So we're going to have a 20-year license from the NRC, and it's only the state who's kind of allowing or disallowing longer term operation at this point. So we continue to fight for not just 5 years or 10 years, but the full 20-year period. And we continue to message around, like, we're going to do 20 more years after that, a subsequent relicensing process. Plants around the country are already doing that. And these facilities are built to last. And it's absolutely the best bang for our buck, for existing clean energy infrastructure to keep running, like Diablo Canyon. It's going to be way harder to take that facility down than just like the maintenance required to keep running it. And so, it's a hugely valuable facility, and our state's not quite there yet in terms of how they talk about it.
You mentioned something I think is really interesting. More and more plants are extending their operating license. And that's different than the technology. They're not shutting it down because the technology isn't there. They're shutting it down just from an operating standpoint. Can you just clarify that a little bit, what that actually means? You said these things are built to last. So talk about that a little bit if you could.
Wow. Okay. Where to start on that one? Yes. Economics. Yeah. I took like 2 economics classes in college, and I really loved them, but I'm not an expert in that. As I've been running Mothers for Nuclear for the last 7 years, I've learned a lot about how in California specifically, we kind of run our economics, and there's a lot of hidden mechanisms in place to reward certain technologies. And it's not just a supply and demand thing, or it's not just a capitalism thing. There's all these other competing forces that we've created, legislation to help drive technology adoption in a certain way, specifically for solar and wind, for renewables. A lot of people have questions about the cost of nuclear. And for one, I think, climate action is important. So we should be willing to pay for hugely powerful, reliable, clean energy. So one, yes, it might be more expensive, but we should be willing to pay for that. And number 2, economics are kind of what we make them. If we would design some of those similar policies to reward nuclear, in addition to solar and wind or instead of solar and wind.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would shift things a lot. And so, yeah, part of the value proposition of nuclear is not just like, here's this huge existing clean energy infrastructure that's already built and very robust, but it's like very valuable into the future. How do we value it? Maybe not the best right now in terms of our economics, but we could shift that.
When you talk about wind and solar, are you seeing the conversation or the narrative be wind and solar versus nuclear? Or are you starting to see more people embrace the fact that it's wind, solar, and nuclear? What's going on in the state? Because it seems like globally people are starting to accept it's an and not a verse. What are you seeing?
Yes, yeah, I love it. There's a huge shift globally, and it's super exciting. And yeah, there's so many great conversations happening now about building new nuclear and how we need all clean energy sources. And I hope California will get there eventually. They're starting to have some talks about like, oh, maybe we should look at SMR, small modular reactors. We don't really know how to have this conversation. So they kind of don't even know where to start at this point. But I'm excited that we're trending in that direction. My company originally started trying to reduce emissions and address climate change by getting renewables contracts. And I think that's partly what led to some of our high electricity prices now is that PG&E was an early adopter of renewables technologies, and they kind of got locked into some long-term contracts for renewables that ended up being fairly expensive. California has some pretty lofty goals in terms of clean energy, and they want to keep pushing that, and they want to, have as much clean energy as possible. When the joint proposal was announced to shut down Diablo Canyon, I think part of the driver for that was that we had just seen the closure of San Onofre, and that it was largely replaced with natural gas. So emissions went up, and our state policymakers wanted to avoid something like that happening in the future. So they said, we're going to replace Diablo Canyon with clean energy. That's not great. I don't even know what to say about it, except like we should be replacing the gas first. And why are we even talking about replacing existing clean energy with other clean energy? People know that we need clean energy, but they still have this idea that certain clean energies are better than others. And I think they have it a little backwards.
If you talk about technology, whether it's data centers, artificial intelligence, talk a bit about technology that's going on right now and how tech and nuclear are starting to be married together. Because that's something I'm seeing a lot of right now, and I'm fascinated by it. Someone as well known as Amazon buying land next to nuclear power plants for data centers. I mean, can you talk a bit about that and what's going on there?
Yeah, I was going to bring up that example as well, which I think is super exciting. And the kind of financial risk right now of building a large nuclear plant is pretty intimidating for anyone who would want to build a nuclear plant. So I think, tech companies are in a great position to assume some of that risk. And so I love seeing Amazon scooping up that nuclear capacity. I hope to see more of that. And regarding plants like using technology to modernize, most of my experiences with Diablo Canyon, it's such a weird mix. We have these amazing upgraded digital control systems that are just like top of the line and really advanced. And so I'm super eager to see a lot more technology solutions to help plants be even more efficient than they already are.
Let's go full circle back to your organization. Your organization has really started to expand globally. So are you seeing similar efforts now happen around the globe, not just in the state of California, but are you guys touching multiple plants in multiple stages of potential closures, that kind of thing, or extending life expectancies from an operating standpoint? What's happening right now with Mothers for Nuclear?
We're fairly small. We like to say that we have some arms, some tendrils in other countries and other states and stuff. Generally, we're full-time working moms, and we don't have a whole lot of time and capacity to go gallivanting around saving nuclear plants. But at the same time, that's exactly what we try and do. So we partner with a lot of other pro-nuclear organizations. So specifically, you probably know a little bit about Pickering. They've decided to refurbish those plants and build more nuclear in Canada. And we've really enjoyed working with Chris Kiefer and Canadians for Nuclear Energy on some of those campaigns. Palisades is completely epic. Nothing like this has ever happened before, where a plant has shut down, been sold off to the company that's, supposedly going to decommission it. And then that company says, actually, we're going to keep running it. So that is super exciting. And, it just got finalized, I think, a few weeks ago that they're going to have some money from the federal government to help them restart operations at Palisades and keep running that plant. So that's in Michigan. We have an informal group called Save Diablo Canyon that we've been meeting, weekly for a few years now, planning these rallies and how we go out and talk to legislatures and kind of teaming up with people from a group called Stand Up for Nuclear and Generation Atomic. We've been, having those meetings for years and years. And then kind of more recently, there's a Saved Palisades group that formed and kind of doing the same thing for Palisades. And now there's a group in Colorado, the Colorado Nuclear Alliance, that, they're trying to support the idea of new nuclear in their state. And how do we make legislation that, supports new nuclear. And so it's been super exciting to see all of this come to fruition. I guess regarding some of our international groups, in Germany, they're fairly anti-nuclear, but there are people like women that work in nuclear there. And some of them reached out to us and, oh, hey, you're Mothers for Nuclear. I want to be a Mother for Nuclear. How can I do it? And so, they had rallies over there to, not really protest, but bring attention to how Germany was, just shutting down their last 3 nuclear plants and instead choosing to burn more coal. And so it's great to have people in other countries where there's, really good examples of what not to do.
Right.
And how do we talk about it and how do we encourage different outcomes? And we're not really successful in Germany yet. I'm hopeful that there can be some shifts there. There's a lot happening in Spain right now, which they're thinking about shutting down some of their nuclear, and Portugal. But pretty much everyone else is like, yeah, we're building more nuclear. We're going to build like dozens of new reactors. Everyone's talking about it. And so I'm really excited to see that positive momentum and also keep helping push, in those last few remaining holdout areas.
Well, it sounds like you're bringing reality into the conversation of perception. For our listeners who'd like to learn more about Heather and many of her team members, I encourage you to visit their website, which is mothersfornuclear.org, and spend some time reading some of the stories. The stories are pretty amazing, both here and abroad, and visit some of their partners. It's a really cool site. I think what you're doing is fascinating. Heather, thank you again for making the time today to join Sprott Radio.
This podcast is provided for information purposes only from sources believed to be reliable. However, Sprott does not warrant its completeness or accuracy. Any opinions and estimates constitute our judgment as of the date of this material and are subject to change without notice. Past performance is not indicative of future results. This communication is not intended as an offer or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any financial instrument. Any opinions and recommendations herein do not take into account individual client circumstances, objectives, or needs, and are not intended as recommendations of particular securities, financial instruments, or strategies. You must make your own independent decisions regarding any securities, financial instruments, or strategies mentioned or related to the information herein. This communication may not be redistributed or retransmitted in whole or in part, or in any form or manner without the express written consent of Sprott. Any unauthorized use or disclosure is prohibited. Receipt and review of this information constitutes your agreement not to redistribute or retransmit the contents and information contained in this communication without first obtaining express permission from an authorized officer of Sprott.